bringing that expertise, in particular working also with public health agencies around the country to help respond to the very critical role that the public health agency was playing at that time to not only kind of monitor the COVID pandemic, but also to put interventions in place to limit and contain the spread of the COVID virus, and particularly focused on the important disease vector, which was at that time international travelers. And because KPMG has such an extensive international network of colleagues around the world, also working in similar federal government, provincial government, municipal government, and health system and public health roles, we were able to contact our colleagues around the world in a manner that I think the Public Health Agency just simply wasn't able to do as fast as we could. I will add, just further to the member's question, we have tremendous respect for all of the employees that we worked with at the Public Health Agency. And as you said, it was an incredibly stressful time for everybody. And I think that we all felt extremely proud. Our team in particular felt extremely proud to be able to support the government and Canadians during this incredibly difficult time.
And Ms. Lee, would you say that it would, well, I want you to describe further what it was like working at that time and the experience that you had in this specific area. And do you really, do you feel that that you were able to bring a value added that was appropriate, and is this something that we should have full-time permanent in the public sector, the kind of expertise that you brought?
Regarding the cybersecurity work.
Sorry, was that regarding the cybersecurity work?
Well, it's regarding Ms. Lee's work for the public sector. I will have further questions, yes, for the cybersecurity, but you know, is this expertise that we should have already had in-house in the public sector, or you know, was there a value added in bringing in KPMG?
Thank you for clarifying the member's question. So I think that we did bring unique and specialized expertise at that time to the Public Health Agency. As I said, one of the key factors that they were looking at was not only the compliance and enforcement requirements that the Public Health Agency and other government departments would require to monitor the policies that were being put in place under the Quarantine Act, but we were also taking a point of view that it would be really important to consider the actual international travelers' experience with respect to these policies. You know, imagine people coming in from other countries, either returning Canadians to their families and loved ones, or people visiting for either business or other personal reasons, being exposed to all of these new policies and procedures upon arrival into the country, or even in advance of boarding a plane that was coming into Canada, for instance. And so we were bringing very specific human-centered design expertise, for instance, to help the government identify the specific experience. We developed journey maps, very detailed process design maps to help them really think through all of the operational impacts that these new policies and evolving policies under the Quarantine Act would have on not just government operations, the air and travel industry, for instance, but also, and more importantly, to international travelers, and especially to Canadians returning to the country.
Thank you. That is the time. Beginning our third round of four. Mr. Viersen joining us virtually. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. We understand that the RCMP is investigating the ArriveCAN scandal. Has KPMG been contacted by the RCMP in regards to this?
The RCMP has not contacted KPMG.
Okay. We know that the procurement ombudsman has said that 76% of subcontractors did no actual work. How would you respond to that, given that you're one of these subcontractors?
Thank you again for the member's question. I can't really comment on all of the other subcontractors that have worked with the government, but maybe I'll turn it over to Mr. Nijar just to comment specifically again on the work that we did for the cybersecurity
yes,
work.
Thank you. So the work that we performed with respect to the cybersecurity work, we performed over a period of, as I mentioned earlier, around 6 months. There was a large body of work that was performed across 5 different streams of work that required very specialist expertise.
Could you be a little more specific? Like a large body of work over 5 streams, that doesn't tell me a lot.
Thank you for your question. So again, there were 5 streams of work that related to, as I mentioned earlier, vulnerability management, privacy, cloud, incident response, and secure development practices. And each of those.
What does that mean for me tangibly? If I'm using this app, you're maintaining security of my data, my name, my address, that sort of thing.
Thank you. So we were asked to perform an assessment of the security and privacy of the application, how it protected the information of citizens, and other parameters around cybersecurity, and that's what we executed on.
Okay. Just going back to the suggestion that you deal with GC Strategies, we heard on February 27th that GC Strategies was also suggested to approach you for this expertise. Did you had you bid on a like separate from this? Had you bid and lost on the application development?
No, we did not bid on any application development work, as far as I'm aware.
Do you have any idea why your company would have been suggested to GC Strategies? Do you have a long-standing relationship with the government on this kind of stuff, or?
We had no relationship with GC Strategies prior. KPMG is known in the industry within Canada and beyond as a firm that has very specialist expertise in the area of cybersecurity, with a huge amount of depth and breadth in those areas, specifically within those 5 areas and beyond. And my understanding is we were approached based on our expertise in these areas and our experience in being able to deliver on that piece of work.
Has this kind of situation ever happened to you before, where Government of Canada official is suggesting that you pursue a contract with another company?
Thank you for your question. Again, KPMG is subcontracted in numerous different scenarios, but with respect to your specific question, I'm not aware of the exact scenario outside of this one.
Okay. KPMG pays taxes in Canada?
Thank you. Yes, we do.
As a taxpayer of Canada, would you not have concerns around the oddity of this? That perhaps we should flag this. This is something that doesn't happen often, being suggested to pursue a contract with another company. Did it ever occur to anybody at KPMG that perhaps this should be flagged?
Thank you for the member's question. I'll take this one, since it sounds like it's a little bit more general than just the CBSA-related work. As we've both said, I think this morning, KPMG has extremely strict protocols around client and engagement acceptance. So we have to go through a very in-depth process every single time we undertake to work with a new client or an existing client to look for any irregularities, any independence conflicts, or other areas of risk that would either be a risk to the client and or to us. And we followed those to the letter for this.
I'm afraid that's your time, Mr. Viersen. Okay. Turning now to Ms. Bradford. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Najjar, you're coined as skilled in multiple areas of cybersecurity, including information security, governance, and incident management. Is there a higher risk of information security breaches when you have to run through the main contractor in GC Strategies? So does that increase, the risk when you're running through other people?
Thank you for your question. In terms of the risk of us completing and executing the work, no, it does not increase, as we're directly working with the CBSA for the work.
So in your professional view, is there a higher risk of information breaches when passing information along through multiple middlemen?
Thank you for your question. We were not actually passed information through GC Strategies with respect to sensitive information on the ArriveCAN application. Again, we worked directly with the CBSA team when we were executing the work.
And in your professional view, with the rise in cyber threats and data breaches, does a private company outsourcing to multiple third-party contractors bring any benefit to stopping potential leaks or breaches of private security?
So thank you for your question. Maybe, sorry, could you rephrase the question?
So, you know, we all know that there's increased cybersecurity risks and data breaches happening all over the place, it seems. So does a private company outsourcing to multiple third-party contractors bring any benefit to stopping potential leaks or breaches of private security?
Thank you for your question. I believe the risk remains the same. Regardless, as again, the subcontractor, in this case us, we worked primarily directly with the CBSA when we were executing on the work.
And in your role, department and company more broadly, do you provide your contractors with services, or are you hired more of in a consultancy role?
Thank you for your question. Sorry, could you clarify to our subcontractors?
So no, in your role, like in your company, would you say that you provide contractors with services, or are you acting more as a consultant?
Thank you for your question. If I've understood you correctly, in this case, we were the subcontractor and GC Strategies was the prime. We were providing professional services to the CBSA.
Okay, so you weren't really a consultant in this case. You were actually providing services.
We were consulting to the CBSA, but the services that we were consulting on were cybersecurity services.
Right. So I guess basically, just to be clear, you were doing both then. You were providing services, but in a consulting capacity.
That is correct.
Okay. With ArriveCAN specifically, what were your duties and oversight over the project?
Thank you for your question. So KPMG had no oversight in the development of the application at all. Our role was specific to the cybersecurity assessment of the ArriveCAN application, the underlying cloud platform, and that's what we executed on, and we provided oversight of the work that we performed for that ask.
And so how can cybersecurity and ensuring robust systems are in place go hand in hand with the hiring out of independent third-party contractors as subcontractors?
Thank you for your question. I'm not clear on the ask, so if you could kindly rephrase.
Okay, so the cybersecurity is your area of expertise, and ensuring that robust systems are in place. How does that go hand in hand with the hiring out of independent third-party contractors as subcontractors?
Thank you. There is no real difference in the work that we would execute being hired as a subcontractor or as a prime to do that body of work, and we would have been happy to be the prime, but we simply followed the ask of the government.
Okay, thank you. Turning now to Ms. Lee, you have a very, very extensive background in digital health. How did you end up at KPMG?
Thank you very much for the member's question. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I've been in the healthcare industry for over 25 years. I was previously at a large academic hospital network and subsequently was given an opportunity to work at KPMG to help establish and create an offshoot of the existing healthcare consulting practice with a focus on digital healthcare.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Encore une fois en français.
Once again, this will be in French. Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés for 2.5 minutes. Did you read the Auditor General's report? Mr. Nargi, did you read the Auditor General's report?
Non.
Yes or no?
Oui, Madame Lee.
Yes. Ms. Lee? Yes. Good. My previous question, I was quoting from the AG's report. We saw similar problems with 2 professional services awarded by PCP to KGPM. Even though they talked about clear deliverables, the contracts were modified by less specific deliverables to allow for greater flexibility. So the extension was not connected to new tasks. It was simply pushing back the deadline, which caused the cost of the contract to write. That contradicts what you said earlier, Ms. Lee. The invoices sent to public health were less and less specific. There were no specific tasks that were detailed, and there were no new tasks added for the same amount. So that really contradicts what you said earlier. Why did KPMG agree to accept more money and agree to amend the contract for less specific tasks? Was it the PHAC, or was it simply a desire to have more money in the pockets?
Thank you very much for the member's question. As I said previously, all of the invoices that we submitted to the Public Health Agency were prior approved by the Public Health Agency. We never changed the approach from the very first invoice to the last invoice in terms of the level of detail that was provided to the agency. And our understanding, just to come back to the other part of your question around the flexibility aspect, it was our understanding from the Public Health Agency that they specifically were very concerned about unforeseen events where they would require assistance from us in the same vein that we had been providing it from the very beginning under the initial TA. The work packages, the work processes, and all of the key activities were virtually the same throughout all of the contract work that we had done for the Public Health Agency over that 2.5-year period. So it never really changed. They asked for the contracting language to be the way it was, to be less detailed in the final contract from the standpoint of that they couldn't possibly predict what was happening during the 3rd and 4th waves.
Donc KPMG ne prend aucune responsabilité dans...
So KPMG takes no responsibility. I'm sorry, your time is up.
Angela, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do now want to turn to the Auditor General's report and her investigation and her findings in 1.42 and 1.43 for your information, for your own documents. It talks about vendors. Quote, we found situations where agency employees who were involved in the ArriveCAN project were invited by vendors to dinners and other activities. It goes on to suggest that, in their view, existing relationships between vendors and the agency's information, science, and technology branch, as well as lack of evidence that agency employees reported the invitations to dinners and other activities, created a significant risk or perception of conflict of interest around procurement decisions. Wouldn't either of you suggest that non-competitive contracts, particularly with this finding, seem as though, in particular, that conflict of interest could be, in fact, real?
I'd like to start by saying under no circumstances did KPMG feel that there was a conflict of interest in place, and we followed all of our internal processes to comply with our policies and procedures along those lines. And as it relates to your comment about the social events and the like, you have to remember that our work initiated in September of 2020. We were in the height of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. Under no circumstances were any of our team members engaged in any of those activities, either prior to our contracting, during our contracting, or after our contracting. So I do not agree with the characterization that there was a conflict of interest in the work that we had done to either procure the work or conduct the work.
Has KPMG at any point in time ever supplied gifts or benefits or dinners to members of the government?
Thank you again for the member's question. To my knowledge, I am not aware of any of that activity happening.
And in regards to the relationships that maybe have had between GC Strategies and that of KPMG, what was the first and initial interaction with these two groups before the contract, or before the task authorizations?
Thank you for the question. So the only other contract prior to the ArriveCAN app was a discovery session for GC Strategies to understand our capabilities with respect to cybersecurity. And that was a very brief discussion to understand our experience in cybersecurity.
Thank you.
What was the date of that?
That is your time, Mr. Desjardins. You will have one other opportunity. If you're able to provide that answer, do you know the date of that? I think that was a question by chance.
Thank you. I believe that was in July of 21.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
So we have GC Strategies, a two-man operation operating out of a basement that's made millions off of Canadian taxpayers during Justin Trudeau's $60 million Arrive scam. And we were told that they would subcontract the work out to people that they found on Google and LinkedIn. But what we've learned today is that Antonio Utano at the Canada Border Services Agency reached out to KPMG, and I got some of the answers to my questions I asked you in my first round. I asked how many employees KPMG has in Canada. It's of 10,000 and 40 offices across Canada. And the senior official from the Trudeau government said that if KPMG wanted to do work for the government, that you had to be a subcontractor to this two-person firm. Is that the usual practice in your experience of the government, that they would direct KPMG, one of the largest firms in the world, to work through a two-person staffing firm, a middleman like this? Is this normal?
Thank you for the question. Again, KPMG is subcontracted by organizations that are small, medium, and of the same scale as KPMG in multiple different scenarios. I'm not aware directly of similar contracts that have occurred for the government with us, but I can certainly check.
So the government has said that it uses 635 IT middleman companies like GC Strategies, Dalian, and you're not sure how many companies of that size KPMG does business with. But has KPMG been a subcontractor for Dalian or for GC Strategies on any other contracts than the ones that we've discussed today?
Thank you for the question. No, we have not.
You have not. You said Sharif Abdu was the government contact on the amendments to the non-competitive contracts. Did you initiate the amendments, or did the government initiate them?
Thank you for the member's question. Sharif Abdu was the DG on the original TA that was directed to us through the CEPS vendor of record, and the amendments were always at the Public Health Agency's request for extension.
Is it a usual practice for you to amend contracts with the government?
Thank you again for the member's question. Contracts vary by the nature of the client circumstances, the engagement work itself. This was an unprecedented time, I think we can all agree.
Okay.
And so the amendments were at their request.
The amendments were at the government's request. Did you speak to anyone in government in advance of your appearance at committee today?
Thank you very much for the member's question. No, we did not.
How many firms have contracted with the Government of Canada with KPMG as a subcontractor? You're not able to provide that answer today? Was that your previous response?
Sorry, could you ask?
How many firms that have been contracted by the Government of Canada have used KPMG as a subcontractor?
Thank you. I cannot answer that today.
Okay. Can you undertake today to provide to the committee that list of those contracts and the contractors for whom you were the sub for?
We can certainly go back and see.
It's a yes or no question. So will you undertake to provide the information to the committee?
That's a yes, Mr. Baird.
Thank you very much. You mentioned you had a discovery meeting with GC Strategies. Who was there?
Thank you for your question. Is that you're referring to the July meeting?
Were there multiple discovery meetings, sir?
There was only the July meeting, and then there was we were asked to provide a proposal to GC Strategies in September.
Okay. Who were at both of the meetings?
So in the July meeting, the cybersecurity discovery meeting was between Imran Bashir and GC Strategies. And
who from GC Strategies?
Thank you for your question. I believe that was Christian Firth.
Okay. So just the two people at both meetings?
Thank you. Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And just for certainty, KPMG has spent $0 on hospitality for Government of Canada officials.
Thank you very much for the member's question. And to my knowledge, that is correct.
Does KPMG provide bonuses for securing contracts with the Government of Canada?
So thank you very much for the member's question. The way that we compensate all of our staff is actually a pretty complicated process.
We've done about $250 million in business with the Government of Canada under Justin Trudeau. We're looking to find out if staff are bonused for getting that work, like the $750,000 that KPMG was paid to advise the government on spending less on contracting.
So thank you again for the member's question, and I will say that no staff or partner is directly compensated for a particular engagement. It's a multivariate, complicated formula on how we assess people's performance against the firm's performance, their individual performance, the contribution they make to Canadian society, and it's a holistic formula that gets pulled together in order to identify compensation for all of our staff.
Thank you. That is your time. Ms. Khalid, 5 minutes, please. Over to you when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair. To the witnesses. Now, let's unpack the ArriveCAN app and the scope of work and services provided by yourselves in general. Now, were the services that were provided just for the ArriveCAN app, or did it have broader application within these different departments that we're talking about? I know that there were big conversations about digitalization in general.
Thank you for the question. For the cybersecurity work, the work was specific to the ArriveCAN app and the underlying hosting platform, which was in the cloud. And I'll defer to Ms. Lee for her body of work.
Yeah, so for the support that KPMG provided to the Public Health Agency, none of that work had anything to do with the app itself. As I mentioned before, all of the work that we did was in analyzing and helping them to plan for the operational impacts of the different policy changes that were coming through OICs under the Quarantine Act. And we also helped facilitate a number of stakeholder engagement sessions to receive input on how those changes should come about. And so none of the work that we did, though, had anything to do with the app itself. It was more about how the experience of travelers, the travel industry, the border control measures needed to be changed or updated based on the evolving policies.
And so when we see a number of different change in the work orders, et cetera, I'm assuming that would be based on new information required in that changing landscape.
Member's question. If I understand your question, the work was such that every single time there was a new order in council, a policy change under the Quarantine Act, I think you can probably imagine the pressure that put on not only the Public Health Agency, but the border services, immigration, for instance, the Transport Canada department. There were numerous agencies and departments that were impacted by these orders and council changes. And so, as I said, our work was to help them really think very deeply and thoughtfully about the way in which operations would have to be updated to accommodate those order and council changes on a timely manner. And sometimes there was very little time for any of these departments or external stakeholders to respond to those OICs. And so for that reason, they relied heavily on us to help them analyze in a timely manner what those process impacts would be, for instance, or downstream impacts to staff training, to supports that might be required at different border crossings, for instance, to facilitate the implementation of those changes.
Now, at any time, did you find that that you had to do a complete turnaround of information or analysis that you had provided based on orders in council?
The member's question. There were numerous times where the Public Health Agency was expected to communicate with their upper management about what they thought they should do to respond operationally. And so, for instance, there were a couple of times when they asked, actually more than a couple of times, there were a number of times where they asked us to reach out to our global network of KPMG colleagues around the world to talk to federal governments in other jurisdictions, talk to our transport-related colleagues to understand what was happening from an air operator perspective, for instance, or in the airports themselves, where we had 24, 48 hours to turn around a global, environmental scan so that they could actually inform policy and implementation of those policies. So this was actually a constant phenomenon during the pandemic, and this went on, for 2.5 years. Because of the multiple waves of the pandemic. So the Public Health Agency was under an incredible amount of pressure to respond during this time, and we did everything we could to help them to do so in a timely manner.
Do you think that Canadians got value for their dollars with this app?
So thank you very much for the member's question. And as I said, neither the work that we did through the Public Health Agency nor directly, although the cybersecurity work was an audit of the cyber parameters of the app, neither of our engagement work had anything to do with the development of the app itself. So it's very difficult for us to comment on that.
Thank you. And lastly, what steps did both of you take to prepare for the meeting today?
Thank you again for the member's question. We, of course, prepared very diligently because we take this extremely seriously, and we wanted to make sure we could come prepared to answer all of your questions today. So we contacted our colleagues who work in this space, obviously our colleagues who worked on the engagements. We spoke with our legal counsel and our advisors to prepare so that we could respond to all of your questions today.
Thank you, but it was short of reading the Auditor General's report.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
No, they read it. They've already testified to that fact. Yes.
Got it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. Now, this is the start of our fourth and last round. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to your evidence with some respect, I don't believe you truly recognize how damning your evidence has been to the Justin Trudeau government. You talk about Mr. Nijjar exercising due diligence and researching GC strategies, but GC strategies, according to the Auditor General, receive upwards to $20 million for doing nothing other than connecting government officials with companies such as yourself. $20 million. They're a pariah. GC Strategies is persona non grata. They've lost all their contracts with the government. They've lost their security clearance. And you aligned yourself with GC Strategies, which brings into question the RCMP may be knocking on your door. So if you haven't lawyered up, you probably should be considering doing that. GC Strategies testified, not under oath, but there is a presumption of telling the truth at committee, to committing criminal acts of fraud and forgery. And this is the company you aligned yourself with to the tune of almost $400,000. Is that correct? Mr. Nijjar?
Thank you for your question. KPMG is not aware of anything related to GC Strategies outside of the work that we performed.
The amount of the contract, was it $400,000?
the amount that we charged GC Strategies for the cyber work was
$400,000. They receive 15 to 30% for doing nothing.
Order.
The government could have contacted you
Just 1
directly.
second. Mr. Brock, I've stopped the clock. I have a point of order. I didn't recognize the name, so if you could just identify yourself again. Is it Mr. Biddle?
Hi, my name's Chris Biddle. We've been colleagues for
Hi, Mr. Biddle. I thought it was you. I wasn't 100% sure, so I heard you in the earpiece, but yes, you have a point of order.
I didn't raise the point of order when Mr. Brock spoke the first time. He's cutting off as the witnesses are answering his direct questions. I know it's an issue of intense interest for all of us, but he's cutting off the witness at all of their answers, even as they're answering the question. It's not that they're being evasive, and I'm having a hard time hearing it, and I imagine the translators will be experiencing the same thing as well.
All right.
You just let them answer.
Thank you for raising that. Mr. Brock, if you just kind of keep that in mind for I'm finding the answers, I'm hearing them loud and clear, but I'm in the room. So Mr. Brock, if you can just kind of just be aware of that for people that are not in the room, which of course is their right as members to Zoom in virtually. So
Mr. Najjar, you indicated you didn't know about the unusual, if not illegal, practices by GC Strategies, which you probably don't even know this. Actually, your evidence today gives credence to what GC really stands for, Government of Canada, because it's the Government of Canada that's asking you to work with GC Strategies. Now, moving on. The Procurement Ombudsman is now investigating a concept known as bait and switch, promising resources to drive up the cost of a contract and delivering less. Are you familiar with that concept?
Thank you for the member's question. Yes, we are.
The Ombudsman has discussed at committee before and is now launching an investigation into this fraud. Is this a practice ever used by KPMG?
Thank you for the member's question, and the answer is absolutely not.
Did this ever apply to the nearly $250 million in government contracts since Justin Trudeau formed government?
Thank you for the member's question. To our knowledge, all of the work that KPMG has done has been under the specific procurement processes set out by the government, and we are extremely proud of the quality the work that we've done.
The answer is no. Has the KPMG been contacted by the Ombudsman on this matter?
Thank you very much for the member's question. To our knowledge, we have not been contacted by the Ombudsman's office.
Will you work cooperatively with the Ombudsman as he investigates bait and switch? Clearly, you're going to be involved in this given the amount of the monies that you've received in government contracts. Will you cooperate?
Thank you very much for the member's question. And as I said, we, of course, would cooperate with any governmental bodies that would contact KPMG. We have not been contacted by the Ombudsman directly. And, of course, we would come.
Now, comply. Justin Trudeau has, during the last 8.5, almost 9 years, increased the size of the federal professional public service by over 40%. In 2015, he promised to cut back on the use of external contracts. Yet, in the fiscal year of 2022-2023, he spent $15.7 billion on professional and social services that year, some of that going to KPMG. Now, I know that you were retained by the Government of Canada as a consultant to provide an opinion or a recommendation on the government's ability to cut down on consultants. Now, leaving aside the irony of hiring a consultant to teach the Government of Canada how to cut back on consultants, I personally could have saved the government almost $700,000 by simply saying, use the federal public service that you increased by 40%. Now, you released that report directly to the government, is that correct?
Thank you very much for the member's question. Neither Mr. Najjar nor I were directly involved in that work, but we are aware, and we also understand that it's very typical for KPMG to be called in to do third-party reviews like that.
Thank you. The report itself has not been tabled with all parliamentarians. Will you provide this committee with the full report?
Thank you very much for the member's question. As I said, neither of us were involved in that work, so I can't comment on
Someone at KPMG was, and will you find out who was responsible for conducting the work and to provide this committee with the report? Yes or no?
Thank you, Mr. Brock. Is that something you could endeavor to get back to the committee about.
Thank you. I was just simply going to say that our understanding was that if the work was done for the government, it would definitely be on the public record. And if we're allowed to disclose without violating confidentiality, then of course we would.
That's
be happy
fine.
to
We'll
comply.
take it one step at a time. If you're able to get back to us on the status of that, and I'll work with the analysts at this side to see if that's available, and if you could report back to us on any limitations you have. I do understand there are obviously client privileges. Parliament supersedes that, but we're not there yet. So let's just see where it's at first as a first step. Ms. Shanahan, you're up again for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can understand the direction of Mr. Brock's questions and certainly Mr. Barrett's questions regarding the practices of KPMG with senior government officials, because, of course, we know that KPMG publicly had its senior officials meeting with top Conservative cabinet ministers in 2014 and 2015. The revenue minister at the time, Carrie Lynn Finley, the finance minister at the time, Joe Oliver, and Prime Minister Stephen Harper, former Prime Minister, were all very happy to appear in public with officials from KPMG's tax department during a time when the CRA auditors were conducting an investigation into the accounting firms, to the KPMG accounting firms' tax schemes, and seeking names of multi-million-dollar clients. So I can understand the direction of these questions because, of course, the opposition is desperate to find a link with ministers of the current government. Have either of you ever met with a minister of the current government in line with this contracting work?
Question. I have not, and I believe that Ms. Lee has not either.
No, I have not.
Well, thank you very much for that. Because, of course, we're here today. We recognize that it was very critical to have the involvement of your expertise in dealing with that unprecedented situation with the pandemic. But unfortunately, some people decided to take advantage of this crisis for their own interests, including, of course, a Conservative insider, very proud to show his donor card and to talk about his desire to be a candidate for the Conservative Party as well as the PPC, David Yeo of Dalian. Now, I understand that you have not dealt with Dalian, and so much the better. But in your client engagement process, what changes have you made now to that process that you have internally, given what you know today?
Question. In terms of our internal processes, and as we described before, we do very specific client and engagement acceptance processes internally in KPMG. We have not changed any of our processes at all. They were rigorous before. They're really rigorous now, but we haven't fundamentally changed any of those processes.
But the Auditor General did note that there was a lack of documentation regarding the contracts that KPMG had. Do you agree that both sides, now certainly PHAC and PSPC have to do their end, but do you believe that both sides should be responsible for making, to ensure that the necessary documentation is in place when a contract is non-competitive?
Member's question. We did everything we were asked to do in terms of providing documentation to Public Health Agency. Prior to that, PSPC, when we were responding to the CEPS RFP, we were, as I said earlier, we were under the direct impression that the Public Health Agency was also providing the appropriate documentation. But as I said, we were not privy to any of that internally with the work that we were doing. And I don't know if there's anything else to add on the CBSA contracting.
No, I think you've covered it. Thank you.
And what kind of contract or what kind of documentation would be normal on your side, even in an unusual circumstance like the pandemic?
The member's question. So I'll just give you a very specific rundown of the kind of documentation we had for the Public Health Agency work. So in addition to weekly detailed status reports that talked about the specific status of all of our activities, deliverables, meetings that we were undertaking, which we gave in writing to the Public Health Agency, we also had all of our deliverables obviously provided to the Public Health Agency sponsors and the team members that we were working with, and those were all quality reviewed by a secondary partner in our firm to make sure that we were meeting all of our compliance requirements, but also providing the right level of quality and standard to meet the Public Health Agency's requirements. And again, as related to any contracting, of course, the necessary statements of work documentation that would accompany the contracts were all part of the package that we had to provide. We also had to sign a form that said that we would maintain the same rate structure and rate card, which was the very same rate card that was established in the original SEPS TA and that we held constant for a 2.5-year period. So all of that documentation and of course, executed documents for the contracting and so on were provided directly to the Public Health Agency for every phase of work we did.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Encore une fois, c'est Madame Sinclair.
Once again, the floor is for Ms. Sinclair Desjardins. You have 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to quote the Deputy Assistant General. He mentioned in a previous committee that he found the whole situation disgusting. He was referring to the fact that a firm with the size and reputation of KPMG would accept to a situation that was very, very suspicious. That's problematic. He also mentioned that the taxpayers didn't get good value for the money that they had paid, and that KPMG had a subcontractor, and GC Strategies took a huge cut for this ArriveCAN app, 30%, I believe. So I think that KPMG simply forgot that it had a role to play, that is to ensure that taxpayers get good value for money and ensure that the government complies with the law, that everyone complies with the law. There's one important aspect that I'd like to refer to. In your risk evaluation analysis, it's surprising that you didn't realize that Kristen Firth, who had several meetings with Mr. Bashir, was also working for Veritach. Veritach was accused for collusion, bid collusion. This was accused by the government. This element should have popped up in your risk and conflict evaluation. If Mr. Bashir had seen this is really problematic. I think we're going to have to take a look at your conflict and risk evaluation report, because this is somebody who had previously been accused by the government, and the justices had required that all employees of Veritach should be given training with respect to bid rigging, and that Mr. Firth had been previously involved with this issue. So my final question today is, and I would like you to really weigh your words, do you feel that KGPM has a role to play in all this and in ensuring that the law was respected and in ensuring that that taxpayers have good value for money? I would like and I would really have liked to have seen Mr. Bashir here today.
Thank you for your question. I'm extremely proud of the work that KPMG performed on the cybersecurity request. I think we provided tremendous value to the citizens of this country. And any situation where we as KPMG can help the government and citizens further safeguard and secure their information and provide recommendations that would help to do so, in my opinion, is providing tremendous value, and that's exactly what we did. We provided multiple areas of improvement, opportunities for improvement, and that was following the execution of a very robust piece of work that we performed.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Desjardins for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to follow up with Mr. Niger's just comment there. The Auditor General found in finding 1.74, quote, that security assessments were completed by CBSA for ArriveCAN in pre-development environment by subcontractors under GC strategy contracts, assuming that's you, KPMG, and several others. However, we found that some resources that were involved in the security assessments were not identified in the task authorizations and did not have security clearance. Although the agency told us that the resources did not have access to travelers' personal information, having resources that were not security cleared exposed the agency to increased risk of security breaches. Mr. Niger, that comes in, I think, stark contrast to your comments of excellent work beyond the questions Canadians have of value for money, which the Auditor General has been clear ArriveCAN did not achieve. That includes the work of KPMG, which in many regards to many Canadians is a failure. Being unable to rely on our public service in such a way that a private contractor or a subcontractor could even refer some work back to the government is a process that is in policy in the Government of Canada. That should there be tasks, authorizations that are of lower qualification that the government can do, this could actually be done. And it's the responsibility of the government and the contractors to identify those issues and then to refer those issues back to the public service. The Auditor General found no instances of that. So there's three major issues when it comes to KPMG in my mind after today's hearing. One, there was clearly no effective cost for value here, something I agree with the Auditor General. And to your own comments, if you actually agree with the Auditor General's report, you would also agree. Two, there's a security issue related to the findings of the Auditor General on whether or not certain individuals for certain task authorizations were in fact security cleared. And the Auditor General herself has said that it exposes the agency to an increased risk of security breaches. Canadians should be concerned. And then, of course, finally, the lack of principle by KPMG as a contractor of the government to ensure one, public dollar was properly met, but communicating that important need to the government, I think, is also one of approach. So I have no further questions other than that of Mr. Niger. If you want to share any comments on the Auditor General's finding of a security breach potential.
So what I can say is that I think you raised a number of points. For one, on the value, again, my answer remains the same. I think we provided tremendous value, and we highlighted several areas of improvement that I think speaks to.
So you disagree with the Auditor General,
Mr. Desjardins? Your time is elapsed. I'm going to allow the witness to answer, but I would ask, because your time is up, that you not interrupt. So, Mr. Niger, please, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As I was saying, I think we provided tremendous value in helping safeguard the information of our citizens of this country. Number two, on the point about security clearance, all of the folks from KPMG that worked on this particular engagement were security cleared. They had the appropriate level of security clearance. So I do not understand how that is attributed to KPMG. I cannot speak for any other organizations that worked on this work on behalf of the government, but everyone who worked from KPMG was security cleared, and we follow security clearance matters and information security in general. We take that extremely seriously at KPMG, and I don't know if there was a third question in there. I defer to Ms. Lee if she heard a third question in there.
If you have an answer, that's fine. I think we can leave.
Thank you, Chair. And I would just reiterate that we followed exactly what the government process was for procurement. Our value for money, in terms of value of our services, they were pre-evaluated during the CEPS contract, and we held those constant throughout the 2.5 years that we supported the work. And just to reiterate that all of our resources who were on the contracts associated with both the Public Health Agency and the CBSA were all security cleared at the level that the government asked of us.
Thank you very much. Just two more slots. Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again, through you, thank you to our witnesses for joining us here today. I want to begin by just making a comment about the concerns that have